I was expecting her to say, "That man has no idea what he's done," like in reference to that Bible quote, but instead she said, that man, I forgive him." She really challenged them to step up and find meaning through, she was saying through marriage and through, being a good husband, but also reminding them to be a leader worth following, which
Any content of Trump that I don't have to intake, I simply don't anymore.
washed up, we don't have that problem. We don't have any mergers planned anytime soon. Hello, everyone. We are washed up. We're here for episode 26, and we are going back to our humble origins of Zoom temporarily. I'm Colin, this is Abby, and we are here to bring you the latest news from a Gen Z perspective so you don't have to listen to the legacy media their grandparents do.
I am home for the weekend, so that is why we're doing a little Zoom recording right now. I'm actually in Vegas sitting in the same seat that I would sit in our early episodes too. So I like the little humble origin shout out.
Yeah, so how's it been being in Vegas? Is it a nice break from being in the swamp for the week?
Yeah, it's always fun to come home after being away for a while. This is actually my first time seeing my brother in a really long time. Like the last time we saw each other was in April, which we were kind of thinking about it, and I think this is the longest I've gone without seeing him ever since life before he was born, which was my 2.5 years without him in my life.
Huh. Well, it's good you got to catch up, and it was probably a good week to be out of DC, if you ask me. Just a lot going on, and I don't know, nothing great. So if you had to pick a week to be out, good week.
Speaking of, I think that we should just launch right into our topics this week.
Sure. So yeah, this week we're going to be talking about the memorial for Charlie Kirk, as our last episode was about his assassination. We went into some detail about how he died, what happened, the suspect they caught, and then this past weekend they had this memorial in Arizona. So what did you see about just how the event went?
I saw that a lot of people went. I saw a lot of people had traveled for it and all the typical faces that you'd expect, but there were also um like influencers there who I didn't think would be there, and I think it was a memorial service that definitely matched up with everything that he and his family would have wanted. I personally wasn't keeping up with the memorial as closely when it was happening, but I did some like looking up research and I saw it appear on my social media for the podcast episode too. But what did you see about it?
Yeah, I think it was in Phoenix and they had a stadium full of like tens of thousands of people. There was a whole overflow stadium. It was just a lot of people who showed up, like you said, and all the big name like conservative podcasters. Donald Trump was obviously there, JD Vance, and um, I only watched two of the speeches, but the one by Erika Kirk and then the one by Donald Trump. And maybe we can start with Erika Kirk. Have you had the opportunity to watch that one?
Yeah, her speech, I mean, any speech from a widow or from family members are usually like very emotional. I think she did a good job of like speaking to what she could, and I think I think it was rightfully done in what she could have said. Like I think that there's been a lot of critique about what she's been saying. Um, I thought it was I thought it was very shocking to hear how she was talking about even like forgiving his killer, which is I think not many people would do. What did you think about her speech?
I thought her delivery was incredible. I've watched the speech twice now, and both times I got chills watching it. Just the way that she kind of built toward that forgiveness. I was sort of analyzing it from like a little bit of like a AP Lit like kind of interpretation of it, and it was kind of just a masterclass in like delivery and speech writing, I thought. I think Michael Knowles had called it like one of the most impactful speeches of the 21st century or American history even. Like I don't know. I think it could have that kind of staying power where it's read back for decades to come. So I had some notes from listening to it. As you said, the part where she called for forgiveness for Charlie's killer was incredible because not only just the raw emotion of that moment, but she cited the Bible as she did throughout this entire speech, and she quoted Jesus on the cross when he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And she kind of hesitated. She said, that man," referring to his killer. And I was expecting her to say, "That man has no idea what he's done," like in reference to that Bible quote. But instead, she said, that man, I forgive him." And it was sort of just this, it inverted my expectation of what she was about to say in the most profound way. I got like full body chills from that part specifically.
On the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him.
Um, do you recall any other moments from her speech or just the way that she delivered it, which again I thought was very strong?
I think that there's a lot of parts within the speech that alluded to a lot of what Kirk stood for in being in trying to replicate and talk about like Christianity. Like I remember the part where she was referencing him as like a Christian husband. And I think that there's been some people talking about his speech or her speech and saying how she's like using it as a way to like politicize things, but I actually kind of don't think that at all.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought the opposite completely.
yeah, like I mean, I'm like the first person to call out when things are politicized or when things seem as they are not, but it did seem like a speech in which she was trying her best to reflect the values that Kirk claimed that he stood for too.
Right, and it was especially impactful because she had just been announced as the new CEO, taking over Turning Point USA after Charlie. So she was kind of like delivering it as not only his wife, but also now the leader of his organization. So again, she had this like balance between the vulnerability and the honesty of everything she was saying, but then also the strength and fortitude of a leader. And she specifically challenged both men and women to step up in individual ways. And I think she hit it on the head when she said, like, men in the West who are disenchanted are kind of logged off and maybe even like engaged in like just distraction for distraction's sake because they don't have meaning in their life. She really challenged them to step up and find meaning through, she was saying through marriage and through, being a good husband, but also reminding them to be a leader worth following, which I think is important to underscore. And then for women, she challenged them. She said, "Guard your heart, everything you do flows from it." And I thought that was very, very profound. But she challenged women to I think she said, be virtuous. And she said also women or wives are not like their husband's servants, but rather they're their helper, their encourager, and play that role. Don't just be like subservient, as some traditional conservatives might put forth.
Hmm. And I think when it comes to partnership and marriage, I'm like more of a believer in the fluidity behind people within the partnership, like a man and a woman, like or a man and a man, woman, woman, whoever's married in the partnership, like can take something out of the speech too, I think. Like I think it doesn't need to be particularly about gender roles, and I think that about a lot of different speeches and about a lot about it and a lot about marriage roles in general. Like I think that sometimes people take things apart and are kind of more missing the major message.
Yeah, I agree. And also, so I know you and I have both read Maureen Callahan's book, Ask Not, which is about the Kennedys, and it talks about the women who the Kennedys destroyed, is the subtitle. So I immediately was thinking of Jackie Kennedy when all of this was happening. I'm curious if that crossed your mind as well.
No, but I can totally see where you're coming from in bringing that up.
hmm Like, do you remember the scene in Ask Not that's about Jackie after the assassination of JFK? And does that come to mind at all?
Yeah, I'm thinking about particularly that scene where she's like cleaning herself up and being like, "Oh, don't don't let the media like see him in this way." And then also in the hospital and even afterwards, she's like picking up the aftermath of his legacy and being and rewriting things to favor him in a light that has lasted till this day.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the parallels I was observing as well. Um, and just this idea, but I actually think Erika Kirk could have more of a lasting impact to come than like for example, Jackie even did culturally after JFK's death. But it's kind of yet to be seen. However, I think there's like a very strong precedent for these strong women who are married to politicians who in some ways seem like they're playing a behind the scenes role or like a supporting role, but are actually extremely powerful in shaping their husband's image and how the messaging of his, you know, campaigns and whatnot go. And so I think she's going to be a prime example, Erika Kirk. Certainly one to watch. And I just was watching her thinking like this is a remarkable person and terrible circumstances that befell her to put her in this role. But so curious to see what comes out of this.
I am too. I really like that you brought up the Jackie Kennedy comparison because now I feel like I'm going to be thinking about it.
So yeah, another speech from this memorial was Donald Trump's speech. Did you watch that one? I personally watched it on two times speed because that was as much as I could handle.
No, I actually didn't watch it. I saw some clips of what he was saying and like about I like read some things up, but you know, for my own like personal mental health, I think that any content of Trump that I don't have to intake, I simply don't anymore. So, what did you think about his speech?
It was fine. It was like exactly what you'd expect. So kind of boring by like exciting by any other person's standards, but boring by we already know what to expect from Trump, and this was exactly that. He went on for like twice as long almost as Erika Kirk, which I thought was not reading the room well, but he kind of like wove through all these different subjects. He started off really focused on Charlie, and then he threw in some like autism stuff, some tariff stuff. He was like, as he does, peppering in his own policy to prove a point of like how great that his own presidency is, and he was crediting a lot of it to Charlie, which was nice. But like, I just think we can do without that bullshit, honestly. Like, it didn't make the speech any better. It just distracted, I think.
I could only imagine what his speech was like. I mean, I could look it up, but I'd imagine it was every like what you were saying. I could imagine it perfectly. Like
It was fine, but not like great.
yeah, like everything in the way that he says his words and in the way that he tries to bring up everything about himself and his reign as well. Like I mean like Charlie Kirk did have a lot to do with the fact that he was elected, especially amongst young people.
Mm.
But I'm not sure that bringing all of that up right now in as memorial is a it just seems like propaganda-y. But I mean like a lot of what he is propaganda-y, and especially um I guess the role that Charlie Kirk played in his campaign as well.
Yeah, that's fair. I can certainly see that. And so the the soundbite that was getting the most attention from Trump's speech was a moment where he was saying like Charlie was a Christian, he forgave his enemies, yada yada, and then Trump kind of paused and injected his, Trumpisms, and he was like, "That's where Charlie and I disagree. I hate my enemy, and I don't forgive them."
He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry.
But then, it was this moment where it was a little bit like surprising, but then he did pivot and make it kind of light and joking again, where he's like, and that's why Erica and I need to talk, and like that's why Charlie's looking down on me, you know, thinking I should do better.
I am sorry, Erica. But now Erika can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent. Charlie's angry. Looking down, he's angry at me now.
And so the media was playing the first half of that soundbite saying like, I don't forgive my enemies and I hate them. They would like clip it there and they wouldn't play the second part, which I do think was important context to include in any like reference to this clip. But I would agree, like in the aftermath of Erika Kirk being very vulnerable and forgiving her husband's literal killer, like can you not just
Like let that
contain
moment
yourself?
sit.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly. And it's sad because I think the two clips that came out of the whole memorial were Erika Kirk forgiving and Donald Trump saying he doesn't forgive. So it's like one kind of negated the other. Couldn't we just have let Erika Kirk have her moment and maybe take a back seat for once?
I agree with that.
So that was not great in my view, although as far as Trump goes, it could have been a lot worse.
It always could be a lot worse.
Speaking of how it could be worse, Jimmy Kimmel has been in the news a lot, and
Yeah. Uh,
do you want to take that one?
yeah, sure. I think we a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago maybe, Jimmy or around the time that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Jimmy Kimmel had monologued on his show and made a joke about how the killer was like MAGA-ish.
New lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them.
And basically the fallout of that was he got suspended um from like ABC and made a comeback, and in his comeback like about a week later he talked about how he monologued again and didn't straight up apologize but did reference Charlie Kirk's death and talked about how he like it shouldn't have died that way too.
Right. So at first I didn't understand the complexities and the nuances of the story and why it was a big deal, but I dug a little deeper and I do think the story is a pretty big deal because behind the scenes of ABC firing Kimmel, which they absolutely have the right as a like company to do, they can fire him if they want, notwithstanding like contract stuff, but um, behind the scenes, there was the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, who went on a podcast and made some comments about basically we can do this the easy way or the hard way in reference to Kimmel and the FCC's ability to give licenses to different broadcasters and implying like if ABC doesn't handle this, then I'll find a way to handle it.
But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC.
And that's a pretty serious like background story. So how do you feel about that? And were you concerned by it from the get-go, or did you have to kind of dig to find what was problematic about this story?
I think I was concerned about it from the get-go, but then we were texting about it and I was like, wait, Colin kind of has a good point about like the business of ABC like being allowed to do whatever. And then I think we were both kind of looking more into it. Um And I did see like all the stuff about the FCC chair, and then you had brought it up again too, and I was reaffirmed that I do th think that this is problematic and stands against a lot of what I believe in about free speech. Like it there's just been this really interesting theme of free speech being demonized, politicized recently in a way that feels very tyrannical, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I agree because obviously the First Amendment protects everyday citizens from having their free speech violated by the government specifically. So even though in this case ABC was the one, terminating Kimmel temporarily, suspending him, we could say, there was some influence by the government in the fact that the FCC chair, essentially it's known as jawboning, which is like when the government exerts pressure to censor or silence speech without even necessarily being the ones to actively do that. So if there was any like if ABC was responding to the government and Carr's comments when they suspended Kimmel, then that could be construed as a violation of the First Amendment, even though it wasn't at the behest of Trump that Kimmel was necessarily fired. Although he, I believe, was calling for it as well, saying like, well, Kimmel's untalented, which I agree, but is beside the point of his
Yeah,
termination.
I saw that he was tweeting about it or truth socialing about it, um, about getting Kimmel fired and untalented. Trump is always calling people untalented whenever he wants to get them fired. And like I don't have any opinion about Kimmel. Like I didn't
I
really or
do.
anything like that. So
I think Kimmel's the worst late night host.
really,
Yeah, I'm a Fallon person. Fallon's pretty good. Like I'll give him that. Um, Obviously, I like Greg Gutfeld, but he's on Fox and whatnot. But Kimmel, I don't find him funny at all. I find him kind of cringy. And same with Colbert. Can't stand Colbert, but that's beside the
that's
point.
a whole other story.
Yeah.
I like Fallon. I've seen a few clips from Kimmel that I like. I think that I grew up watching a lot of Fallon though, like in terms of like late night hosts. But um reaction wise from like our generation or more young people, have you seen anything in response to what had happened with Jimmy Kimmel?
No, because I think the story was kind of like there were several layers to the story. So unless you really were willing to dig, it was kind of just a blip in the headlines where it's like Kimmel suspended, oh, he's back. But so it's sort of like this blip, and I don't think Gen Z had the attention span to necessarily be like, wow, this is a big violation of our First Amendment right. But it was because, again, the issue of jawboning and the federal government exerting pressure that changes people's speech and using like the licensing, the FCC to um, jerk around broadcasters. That is a huge problem that I think will probably continue, but I don't think Gen Z was super like dialed into that issue.
I think that the Gen Zers who were dialed into the issue were people who I guess would fall under like our category. Like I did see a few Vista alum Vista people posting
Shout
about
out.
it. Shout out to them. And also other common networks of journalists that I've met throughout the years who I follow or keep up with on LinkedIn. I saw posting about it as well. And in my mind, since it was like posted so many times, I thought to myself, oh wow, Gen Z is super into this. And then I did look and checked out some, I guess, non-culty journalists, Gen Zers. And I didn't see them posting as much as, say, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, for example.
Yeah, so like on LinkedIn, I follow FIRE, the foundation. Yeah, Individual Rights and Expression. And their, I think President Greg Lukianoff, he wrote a New York Times op-ed, and that he said, the weapon that you reach for today will be used against you tomorrow. And I think that that's an interesting take. And it inspired me enough that I wrote it down because I was like, yeah, I think we should be thinking about these things and all of the reactivity and the backlash against like broadcasters and speech in terms of how is this going to the conservatives shouldn't be cheering it on because it could very well be turned against them at any point. And also, I wanted to say, Erika Kirk in her speech shouted out the First Amendment and said she thought the First Amendment was the most human amendment because people are naturally talking and thinking beings, and so she thought that like it only made sense that we protect that and make that obviously like our first priority in a way. Um, I thought that was inspiring as well as the rest of her speech and something that everyone in the room at that memorial should take to heart.
Yeah, that was a good connection to make as well. I didn't see that op-ed. I kind of want to read that now.
And so, okay, so that's one example of how Trump has been coming after his political opponents, rivals in a way. Even though Kimmel's been reinstated, there was some talk about like, so after ABC reinstated him, some of the affiliates still didn't want to air him. So like St. Clair was one when they were saying like, we don't want to platform him anymore. So there's some like back and forth between, I guess, ABC and their affiliates about the right way to handle that. I think they agreed ultimately to put Kimmel back. But just interesting, like behind the scenes of how that stuff works. It's not as the headlines would have you believe that it was over and done with and nothing happened in between, but there actually was quite a bit, I think. And with that, do you have anything else on Kimmel or the Kirk Memorial, anything like that?
I'm really interested to see like the future of I guess talk show hosts and entertainment in that way. Um, and see if anyone is scared of pushing anyone's buttons or if anyone's like walking around eggshells. I think probably not. Um, but it would be interesting to see if anything changes there. Not that I'm going to be keeping up with talk show hosts just to see, but if anyone is.
Yeah, because Trump has been very litigious when it comes to suing the media. As you know, I think he got a settlement from ABC way back at the beginning of his term. I think he also sued the New York Times, Wall Street Journal over like various different reporting that they did. So he's very quick to sue the media, which I think is a bad look. I think it doesn't really help the situation that we're in. And he likes to beat up on the media when it suits him, and I think that the Kimmel thing is just another example of that.
I agree with that.
But also, there's this thing with like media, whenever they're trying to have a merger, it has to be approved by, I believe, the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. And so the government does have that kind of power or leverage over media whenever they're attempting to merge companies or something. And that's just one way that like they can apply pressure, the government on media, even if it's not happening like out in the open in public and everyone can see it. But something to take note of when you're considering like who to tune into. Washed Up, we don't have that problem. We don't have any mergers planned anytime soon.
Independent media. And to be honest, I have really thought about it before. Um, if if some third party approached us and was like, "Oh, we want you to record A, B, and C, would we do it?" And I was like, honestly, I think I would hope that I don't get to the point of partnering with a third party or reading out ads or anything that I have no belief in. Like I never want to get to that point or like if Washed Up like blew up and we were on like a more popular platform.
If we had 31 subscribers.
Yeah, exactly. I always think about, not always, but when I think about Washed Up, I think about how I would want like a really detailed contract about what we're allowed to say and about our freedom in saying things because I would hate to feel shut down in any way or if like we were recording under like maybe a more left-leaning service or something and we critique something that goes on that a lot of left-leaning people are in favor of like I wouldn't want that to be a reason why washed up changes. Like, I don't know. I've thought about it before, not to not to say anything.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about. I also tend, like, I've thought about this before too, and just the way that we're so free in our messaging, we can take any stance on any issue, and it's great. But like, obviously, people who are like beholden to legacy media or work in like some kind of sponsor setting or whatever, it would be tough because you would have to be very selective and even in choosing not to talk about certain things that like your partner wouldn't want you to talk about or something, you're selling your audience short, and we will be doing none of that.
I think that the two of us, at least you, have pushed me to talk about things that I wouldn't normally want to talk about and have pushed me to open my mind and view things in different ways as well. So trust that, guys. There's many a times where I feel like I've been like, Colin, I don't want to do this. And then we end up doing it. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. Like, for example, the military parade.
Yeah, that was one of our best yet.
Literally the episode right before Colin and I were like, we don't want to go to this. We don't want to do this. And honestly, I really enjoyed recording it. So, and
Actually, we have another event we should announce. We're going to be going to see Kamala Harris's book tour on October 9th, so stay tuned for that.
yes.
And we'll be giving our opinions that are not sponsored in any way, shape, or form.
Yes. And I'm gonna read the book before we go to that too, I think. I decided.
I've heard it's grueling and a slog, so good luck.
I kind of heard that wasn't that good. Anyways,
I've heard she's kind of been mucking it up on the tour so far. So
we'll see.
so much to go into, but we'll save that for another time
Yeah.
because I think first I'm gonna give a little rundown about our last story of this week with James Comey being indicted. This happened toward the end of last week, like Thursday. And stick with me for a little bit because there's a little bit of setup. But essentially, James Comey is the former FBI director during Trump's first term. He got fired pretty infamously in like early on in Trump's first term for his handling of it's called like Crossfire Hurricane, this investigation into possible collusion between Trump's campaign and Russia. So Trump hates Comey. He's been very vocal about that for years and years. But recently, the statute of limitations is running out for alleged dishonesty by Comey in a setting where he is testifying to Congress about whether or not he'd ever authorized leaks. So the statute of limitations is set to run out in like 2 days, and so they dropped the indictment after some internal moving people around. They had it was essentially like a prosecutor in the East. Hang on. They had a prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia who was named Eric Siebert, and he got axed by Trump last week because he didn't want to pursue these charges against Comey. So then Trump installed Lindsey Halligan instead as the prosecutor, and they got a grand jury together and they indicted Comey on 2 out of 3 of the charges they wanted to bring against him, including again false statements and in a congressional hearing. So, what do you think about all of that? And do you think that this is more example of Trump coming after the enemies that he says that he hates?
Yes, I do think that. And I do think that there's an issue with politicizing his enemies, I guess. An issue that I see with the replacement of the attorney is kind of thinking about it in a way of when you are politicizing the law rather than basing it off of the rule of the law kind of undercuts like a certain a certain foundation to the way that these things work. Like it seems like a weaponization of the prosecution to, I guess, punish the Trump enemy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a unique situation because Trump has been so vocal about hating Comey that it's like this is not a secret at all. And there's been other instances in the past of possible past presidential administrations like targeting their opponents with politicized charges or, indictments even. You could even make the argument that this was happening to Trump under Biden's administration, and that's why Trump is so like willing to go there, and he's doing this as like revenge for what they did to him. I could see that argument, to be honest, but it's weird the way that this went down with indicting Comey, where again the first prosecutor did not want to pursue this, and the way that he was fired by there's a Truth Social post that I think is worth reading, which is not something I find myself saying a lot. But so Trump posted on Truth, and it's addressed directly to Pam Bondi, which is like really weird because a lot of people were saying, did he just mean this to be like a DM or something? I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically he says, Pam, I reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story as last time, all talk, no action, nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam, Shifty Schiff, Letitia? They're all guilty as hell, but nothing is being done. So he goes on and on and on. At the end, he says, justice must be served now, President DJT. And he references that they impeached him twice, indicted him 5 times. So it's just weird because he's being very open about like, I want you to go after these people because I don't like them and because they did this to me, and I don't really necessarily. He says they're guilty as hell, but like guilty in what way? And apparently the indictment that they handed down, even though a grand jury did sign off on it, technically, it's very thin and not even really clear what the alleged lying under oath was. People are trying to figure that out.
I've been seeing that there's a lot of like very like I guess thinly, loosely tied things to the indictment. So people are like, what is this even about? And I think if anything, it's overall like this indictment could create a lot of fear for like I guess future people making an enemy out of Trump or of government officials. Like I don't think it's right to for people with power to be able to just outwardly target somebody because they're your quote enemy or anything like that. I think the Truth Social posts are so interesting though.
Yeah, I mean, I think he did mean to post it publicly, even though some people were saying like maybe it was an accident that it got by. Um,
Surely there's accidents.
no, I don't think it
Pretty
was.
high.
I think he wants his opponents to see, like, look what I'm willing to do to people who I hate. And to be clear, also Comey denies any such wrongdoing as he's accused.
Oh my gosh. Anyways.
But people are saying like the fact that they brought this in the Eastern District of Virginia, which was where Comey was testifying from, like remotely during COVID. If they had tried to bring this indictment in DC, it never would have passed a grand jury, is what they believe. And I could see that argument.
I could see that too.
So we'll see how that one plays out. It's unclear if Trump is now going to try to indict again. He mentioned by name Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, and Senator Adam Schiff. So
Can you imagine just like being on Truth Social and seeing a target like being placed on your back by Trump and being like, God, am I next?
yeah, I mean they must be used to it by now. Like
It's just so silly to me.
just like comes with the territory, I think, of Trump. But I mean I don't think it's right. I think it's wrong.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know how else to put it exactly. So those simple words will have to do.
Is there anything else that you want to bring up about this topic?
No, I think that's it. We're coming down on time here, so wanna just wrap it up there. We'll have our regular scheduled program next week.
Yes, thank you to everyone for sticking with us for this short and sweet episode. If you have any suggestions for anything that you'd like us to talk about or do, feel free to leave a comment or email us washedupweekly@gmail.com.
Yeah, and we're excited to bring you our coverage of Kamala Harris's book tour in a week and a half or two. And also, we will be reading some hate comments that we've recently gotten, just as a special little segment for everyone's entertainment.
Yes, yes, I'm excited for that. In person too, so it'll be more fun.
Yep.
Okay. See you next.
Washed up
Washed
out.
up.